For many years, I didn't want to tell this story. It is painful, embarrassing, and to a greater extent unbelievable. But if I am ever to move on, I need to put this behind me for good. So yes, I am gonna talk about Costa Rosa. A lot of you are probably gonna go, what is Costa Rosa? And yeah, that S fair. It was a niche hashtag that circulated certain social media circles back in 2017. I was a sort of background community manager for a group of influencers. No big mainstream names, but they had a decent set of followers. They were all into the more obscure corners of the web, focusing on a particular age group, a social issue, or some kind of special interest. These were people who got sponsorships by staying content approachable, sponsor-friendly, and authentic. In truth, they had all media coordination groups with managers, stylists, and a whole slew of background people making sure their content was filtered and greenlit. I was part of this background team. For obvious reasons, I can't say their names. Some of them are still around, in one way or another. Others I will refrain from mentioning out of respect for their loved ones. Now, Costa Rosa. For weeks, me and the coordinators had been running into a problem. There was something we called an expectation of excellence, and it was getting impractical to coordinate localized trips and bookings for content creators on different continents. We had a vegan guy in Cardiff and a friendly middle-aged kinda sorta red state baker in Tennessee. As you can imagine, we had to do a lot of varied work. So after weeks of dwindling interest, we had to funnel attention into something new. Someone had this idea of a joint resort. We reached out to various locations about sponsorship deals, and in return, we'd make their place look gorgeous. It was the kind of push where we could put all eggs in the same basket and get some great content out of it. Problem was, no one was biting. Then someone said, does it have to be a real place? It sounded like a stupid question. I mean, it had to be. You can go somewhere that doesn't exist, but the more you think about it, you can make anything as real as you want it. We could say it as exclusive. Someone said, invite only, a private island kinda thing. Another chimed in, we just need a name and an area. Some Central American island. Think Belize, Panama, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is in Africa. No one cares. We finally settled on a fictional island off the coast of Costa Rica. All we needed was a name. I'd been quiet up until that point, and the silence was getting to me. So I just threw it out there. Let us call it Costa Rosa. The Pink Coast was our make or break project. We came up with all kinds of crazy ideas. We had a food guy who pulled out 3 kinds of crab recipes and called them cultural secrets of the locals. One of our video guys added that we could edit certain videos to make the beach look pink. We came up with names for streets, hiking trails, local fishing boats, all of it. We made a list of every fruit you could find on the island. We made it all up, just so that if anyone asked, we'd have the answers. It got to the point where people were loudly clapping at each other as lies. I vividly remember when someone came up with the idea of a bioluminescent waterfall, saying it could be the proof of the island's beautiful biodiversity. And I am not gonna lie, I was into it. This was the kind of business we were in, and Costa Rosa was this huge, breathing dollar sign. And of course our influencers would be into it. You just had to frame it all in a way that made them look like heroes, inspiring the little people to step out of their comfort zone and aim for the stars. I was having some trouble privately though. I graduated college with a bachelor's in communication. That's where I met my fiancé. But I sort of stumbled over the influencer business. I've always been a bit pear-shaped, and working with these larger-than-life beautiful people made me feel like I was part of the in crowd. I'd never had that, which was something my fiancé couldn't really understand. We got into a ton of fights about it. When you work from your phone, you never really off the clock. You see something cool when you out shopping, tag it, send it. You hear about some interesting place downtown, check it out, talk to the owner, get a foot in the door. People around me got tired of never really just hanging out with me, and in hindsight, I can see why. They were always the third wheel. But when our first Costa Rosa content was launched, things turned bad. We were having some of the worst fights ever. I thought it was inspiring, he thought it was fraud. I argued that we weren't selling anything, but he argued we were selling a lifestyle. Either way, it got to the point where we postponed the wedding. I suppose it was a good thing we'd been too lazy to renew our passports, or we'd be out thousands of dollars from a non-refundable honeymoon. We didn't officially separate, but the distance from the couch to the bed seemed longer every day. In about 2 weeks, the whole project went off the rails. Sure, we were getting clicks, and we had a couple of sponsorships lined up, But there were some things we hadn't anticipated. For example, there was another group in Eastern Europe that hijacked the whole thing. They made their own videos with their own influencers going to Costa Rosa. They never even talked to us about it. They just stole the whole thing. They weren't even discreet about it. We had a couple of other small-time copycats. Some people mentioned turning down an invitation to go there on Twitter. Others mentioned how they'd been contacted but refused to go for one reason or another. There was this one London-based singer who claimed she was going there, only to cancel at the last minute and showing her fans a gift bag from the organizers on a live stream. But somehow, things got worse. Scams, fake raffles, and lotteries. Like this video to get a chance to go to Costa Rosa kind of stuff. And it was moving some real money too. We were panicking. We never signed off on that. Our talent hadn't either. But what were we supposed to do? If we came clean, our careers were over. One in the team came up with an idea. We could go somewhere that is as close to Costa Rosa as possible and show the real thing. That way we had our backs covered. We could point to the map and say that was it. Sure, we could admit taking a few artistic liberties, but it would cover our tracks. And somehow, we found the perfect spot. I didn't know the real name of the place. We all agreed to just call it Costa Rosa to not slip up. It all went by so fast. There was a group call, something about boarding tickets, someone waiting to pick me up. I lost my luggage at the airport, but there was no time to stop. All I had to do was get there, and everything would sort itself out. I slept through the flight and mumbled through the transfer. There was a boat somewhere. Temperature shifted and the language on the signs looked different from home. And within a few hours, I was standing with my bare feet buried in the pink sands. They really were pink. Now, we made up a lot of stuff about Costa Rosa. Sure, the pink beaches was one thing, but there was also the fog. We called it a refreshing summer phenomenon, a heavy fog that rolled in from the coast every morning causing this white, almost cyan, mist. But there really was a mist on that island. I could barely see my hands in front of me as I stepped through it. Seeing this place for the first time felt like a Disney movie. You can really believe spots like this really exist. It was almost exactly as we described it. Pink sands, fruit trees, colorful birds. No bioluminescent waterfall though. Then again, those were only seen at night. I couldn't believe how lucky we'd been. This might as well have been the real thing. We were a group of 16 people, 4 of which were influencers. The rest of us were all behind the camera. We were all saying the same thing. It felt like stepping into a dream. It was too perfect, and we knew perfect. Perfect was our business. There was no one there to greet us, so we didn't know where to go. Our bags must have been taken to the hotel. We figured they'd gotten the arrival time wrong, so we spent most of the afternoon just relaxing by the water, watching the tides roll in to tickle our feet. It really was beautiful. I remember dozing off for a bit as the others tried to get the hotel manager on the line. Someone suggested we walked, but we had camera equipment and not a lot of patience. And, well, we weren't in a hurry. It was mid-afternoon when Jay woke me up. Jay was one of our cameramen, a Southeast Asian guy with these big round glasses. No matter what you said, he'd just nod and smile. Not because he didn't understand, but because he found out early on that it was best to just kinda go with the flow. Lean into the vibe. They're people, he said. I think we heading out. I groaned and got up, only to see a dozen strangers flocking around our team. A lot of smiles, hugs, and welcomes. Pleasant people. Then I realized these people didn't live on this island. They weren't even crew. They were tourists. I can't believe we here. Someone yelled. I thought it was a scam. Another said, hand to God, I thought it was a scam. I did. People were coming up to shake our hands and chat. All of them were viewers of our content, in one way or another. They recognized our talent immediately, who shot me a half-smiling please get me out of here kind of look. We took charge and sorted things out, making sure we all got some space to breathe, and making it clear that we appreciated the enthusiasm but that this was a private occasion. The tourists didn't seem to mind. They weren't coming down from their high anytime soon. I can't believe we here, one said. It really feels like a dream. We walked! There was no point in standing around, and we needed some space from the tourists. I couldn't believe how bad our luck was. This place had been thoroughly vetted, and the chance of someone else finding it the same time we did was astronomical. It wasn't just unlikely, it was close to impossible. It was one of our talents, Kim, that finally spoke up. A short woman in her early 30s with a big personality. She had this marriage advice/calisthenics themed channel. Can whoever booked this just call the hotel? She said. It has been hours. Everyone stayed quiet. We didn't have a clear answer. We all just kinda pointed at one another and figured someone who didn't show up was the one who made the booking. But it left a strange thought this had all gone very fast. Suspiciously so. We spent most of the afternoon and the early evening following a long road, picking fruit straight from the trees and drinking from the island springs. We met a couple more tourists, but they didn't seem to recognize us. They didn't even speak the language. They were just sort of happy to be there. It was all so fantastic. You didn't feel tired. No matter how long you walked, you didn't get that hungry or thirsty. There was fresh fruit hanging from low branches, and exotic smells coming from blooming flowers. There was this one blue-looking sunflower that was about as tall as me just off the side of the road. Everything just felt right. Promoting a place like that would be the simplest thing in the world. But there was also a strange quality to it, and I couldn't help but to notice it affecting the others. I first saw it on Jay. He was looking down at his hand, slowly opening and closing his fingers, like he was trying to sense something. When he noticed me looking, he reached out and put his hand on my cheek. I pulled back a little. Sorry, he said. I didn't know you were real. I laughed it off, and he did too. We never found the hotel. We did find a few road signs, but no one was paying enough attention to care. The roads had the same names as those we brainstormed in our group chat. Some of them hadn't even been made public. As the sun began to set, the island changed. We could see a faint glow coming from the water, and there was a serenade of hissing insects in the distance. Even at its coldest, Costa Rosa was comfortable. Some folks stripped down into their underwear. It all had this sort of spring break kind of vibe, like we weren't actually there to work, but to enjoy ourselves. Some folks were pulling pranks. 2 guys went skinny dipping. One of our producers found a mossy spot near a rock and took a nap. And Kim, the faithful calisthenics person, she was making out with one of our social media managers. By the time I walked away, they'd gone to second base, but I paid most attention to Jay. There was something about him that didn't seem right. He was pulling off these slices of bark from a tree and rolling it into a pointy end. He poked his finger with it over and over, as if to see if he could feel it. I don't think he did. He was smiling too much. It was hard to concentrate. I was constantly shaking my head, trying to focus. I must look like I was having a seizure, but I doubt anyone was paying attention. They were busy dipping into their own kind of nonsense. As the sun set on Costa Rosa, I fell asleep in the moss. It was the warmest kind of sleep I'd ever felt. Perfect temperature, perfect softness. Who the hell needed a hotel anyway? By morning, the fog rolled back in. I could barely see my own hands. For a moment I couldn't remember where I was, or how I got there. It took me a moment to mentally retrace my steps. The flight, the boat, it was all a blur. All that mattered was that I'd made it to Costa Rosa. Everything else was secondary. It looked like everything had been covered in a soft cloud. I could see a couple of silhouettes in the distance, but I couldn't tell who was who. I sat there, taking in the atmosphere, eating a fresh fruit for breakfast, though I couldn't remember where I got it from. When the morning fog finally cleared, there weren't many of us left. Some had wandered off, others had made their way back down the road. There were also these hiking trails that I suspect some had followed. Both Kim and Jay were gone, and no one seemed to have a plan. We were all distracted, me included. As I walked around, feeling the gentle moss between my toes, I tried to think of what I'd packed. A pair of socks, a shirt, anything. I could vaguely imagine the suitcase, but I couldn't make heads or tails of what I'd packed. I remembered getting into a taxi or maybe an Uber, but then there was this blank space. There was a check-in somewhere. A ticket, maybe. I tried to think of my fiancé. We were still together, officially, but there was something we'd talked about that was nagging me. Not our fights, but something trivial. It really bothered me, like an itch in the back of my mind. It took me a while to realize I'd wandered around in a daze. I had no idea where I was anymore. There was no path. The others were gone, and yet everything was pleasant. It must have been around noon when I finally saw some other people in the distance, a small group gathered around a clearing. My first instinct was to wave at them, but my chest tightened. There was something off about them. Giving it that second of hesitation, I noticed a couple of things. All 3 of them were fully undressed, and they were strangers to me. There were 2 young men and an older woman. One of the men was carrying something in his right hand, and they were all looking down at the ground. I kept my head low and listened from a distance. It feels so real, the man holding something said. Like I am really here. It is amazing, said the older woman. It's perfect. They shared some fruit and had a laugh. I was just about to get up when I saw the man holding something turn to another angle. He was holding a gun. He pointed it at something on the ground and fired 3 rounds. The others cheered. Ivy always wanted to do that. He smiled. I love this. They turned their attention northward, away from me. They must be heard something. Chuckling to themselves, they walked away, leaving me to sneak ahead to see what they'd done. The soothing tropical silence cast a stark contrast to the sudden gunshot. I almost choked on my own spit when I saw her, face down in the undergrowth. Kim, shot dead at close range. More people had arrived at Costa Rosa that morning. It's like everyone had been invited and arrived at the same time. They all said the same thing: this was a dream, too good to be true. They couldn't believe that there really was a Costa Rosa, and that they were there to enjoy it. No, for them, this was too unbelievable. I stayed close to a road, listening and watching, hoping to see someone I recognized. But it was getting harder to concentrate. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It had to be a dream. I barely felt my fingers when I pinched myself. And yet, for some reason, I knew I shouldn't give in, even though it was easy to do. I heard gunshots throughout the day. There was smoke in the distance. And by dinner time, when I went to the beach, I saw 2 women playing in the ocean, trying to drown one another. They laughed and cheered as they fought, scratched, and strangled one another. They could barely feel a thing. It was just a funny game. But one of them dipped below the surface, and the bubbles stopped, and yet the other kept laughing. The more people I met, the more nightmarish they seemed. Some of them brought things to the island, like the man with the gun. One brought chains. One brought barbed wire. There was this one guy walking up and down a hiking trail with some kind of Star Trek sword. Others seemed friendly enough, casually chatting with people they recognized. But sometimes they'd just act out and attack, seemingly at random. In the afternoon, I heard someone yell. They'd spotted one of our talents. I think it was the baker. All of a sudden people were rushing to find them, cheering as they bound and leapt through the sands. Ivy always wanted to meet her. Someone said, she has such a lovely voice. I can't fucking stand her. Another muttered, self-centered bitch. It's like they were thinking out loud. It wasn't a conversation, just a constant verbal stream of thought. I followed them for a while. A few of them saw me, I think, but they didn't care. I wasn't the famous face they were looking for. I looked like anyone. I didn't want to think of what they might do if I tried to intervene. I was outnumbered, but as I watched from afar, I didn't pay enough attention to my immediate surroundings, where a familiar face crept closer. I didn't notice Jay until he was right next to me. I barely recognized him. He'd fashioned a shift from a broken camera stand, and he was half covered in dry blood. And yet, he was calm as can be, slow blinking like a warm cat resting on the porch. He reached for me, and my instinct was to pull back, but he could have that shiv in my neck in an instant. I froze. He slowly ran a bloody hand across my cheek. That was it. Ivy always wanted to do that. He whispered, "You look so soft." He nuzzled his nose against my ear and sighed, then he stepped away. "You raise so nice," he mumbled. "I like you." And that was it. He wandered off, having let his intrusive thoughts win. Maybe I was lucky not to be running through his mind any more than that. Maybe, to him, I just looked soft. Maybe that was all there was to it.